Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarah and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran, and they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by stages toward Negeb. The word of the Lord.
This morning we continue exploring call stories of people in the Old Testament as they relate to not only the New Testament, but to our future and what it means to be on journey, to be called by God in ministry. We are having fun with Star Trek thoughts and themes, and the challenge to go boldly where no one has gone before. Kind of as a way to set our minds to think about what it is that we need to brave. The new frontier, new beginnings, new ways of being and doing church. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise and its continuing mission. To explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. In many ways, this is God's story and our call story to partner with God, to take God's lead as we seek to be on God's mission towards God's new future, God's new beginnings, to explore the unknown, the vastness of what is out there for us to experience and be a part of, to seek out new life, new relationships, renewed ministry, to walk blindly in faith, and to go boldly where God calls and instructs us to go. But don't hear me saying that we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Rather, we are exploring the possibilities and the opportunities to free ourselves up a bit and hopefully discover a refreshed way of engaging people in God's mission here at Prairie Baptist Church and beyond. We started last week with Noah and Noah's call story and his wife and family who obediently followed God's very detailed instructions to build an ark, to gather male and female animals of all sorts in order to bring about a renewed creation, a new beginning filled with covenantal promise between God and God's people. This week, we explore Abram at the beginning of his story. Yet to be renamed Abraham, who is really no special person at all. He is not identified as Noah was, trustworthy and honorable, the only good person left on earth. But he does show up just before this section in chapter 11 as part of the genealogy of Noah's family tree through Noah's son Shem in Genesis. And not again after this passage do we discover him or anything about Abraham until he shows up in Jesus' family tree, found in Matthew's gospel, which begins with chapter 1, verse 1, a record of the ancestors of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham, the great patriarch who followed instructions to partner in God's mission and God's story, having no idea where his blind faith and obedience or where his story might lead. Abram's call was to leave his family, to leave his father's house, the land, the extended family, all of their stuff and animals except for those things that they would need, and to follow God's lead. He was 75. And for anyone who thinks 75 is an age where we just don't have to do anything anymore or be called into ministry, you need to pay attention to Abraham. He traveled along with his wife Sarai, also receiving a name change later in their story. The traveling was a bit easier without children, but painful still because they were without children, and perhaps without hope that their story and their family life, their kinship and tribe would continue. If there were no heirs in the family line to maintain this ongoing story of theirs, to take care of the land and the livestock and to carry on the kinship narrative, it would end. But they did not know. Often we do not know what God will use us for, what God will use our emptiness to call us towards something, to provide us with a path to be able to think about the impossible, the improbable, and to gain a renewed hope. What would this blessing mean? How would they, the empty, barren couple, become a great nation or be a part of God's promises? Surely all around them, who they told what they were about to be doing, thought they were nuts, just like those who watched Noah build an ark. Much like the story of Noah building an ark, Abram and Sarah's call story is to do something uncommon, unthinkable, to leave the past behind. Old Testament professor Catherine Schiffedecker shares, this was an open command to go from it all towards it all, from what they knew to a brave new frontier when relationships in the Old Testament were kinship-based. People lived, moved, and had their very being in their kinship group. It may not seem that unusual for us today. In fact, it's really more the norm for families to spread out and to be separated from one another, especially so in our American culture. When I was challenged to consider being open to a possible move from my family of origin when considering my call, I often referenced Abraham and Sarah to justify my response to God when I said, yes, I will do what you are asking, but don't make me leave my family. When God called me to vocational ministry, I had no idea what it meant, or where I was headed, or what I would be doing. This is Abram's story as well. But Abram's story helped me to say yes, to have faith in what I did not know. I was saying yes to something new, to something different, and yes, some people thought I was crazy. But even this was a challenge and the unthinkable. But God was committed. God kept promises. Abram and Sarah packed up what they could, got it all together, set their GPS directions, and followed God's map. They left it all behind: the inheritance, a father's house, the place he was born and raised. As Schifferdecker says, no one would want to do this. To go from what you know to be a stranger in a strange new place. Here is a map that kind of shows you a bit of what that looked like. This was no easy travel. It was hot. It was dry. And even though God had given an intentional map and direction of where to go, they didn't have all the things that we have today. There were no quick trips open 24/7. There wasn't quick, easy, available food and water. There were animals to bring along, kinship folks, a nephew, traveling towards the promises of God. I was mindful of this yesterday and how hard this trip must have been when I was taking a walk on a pathway and just stumbled over a rock. It was rocky. It was hard. But Abram was faithful. God called and promised Abram blessings and protection that continued throughout God's story, and blessings we have received and experienced today in our relationship with Jesus Christ. But this blessing and these promises of blessing were not just for Abraham. And it wasn't about riches or wealth or receiving something because he was faithful. It was the blessing to be a blessing. To be a blessing that we still continue to receive and live into today. It was a call to be a blessing on behalf of God, to share God's blessings with others, as we are called to do so through Christ. Abram does a remarkable thing along this journey. We don't hear about complaining or any of the hardship that this must have caused in their family. But instead, at each step of the way, he sets up an altar and worships God. This is a part of his mission. To go into a land where he was a stranger, where God was not yet known, to discover new ways and new life and new relationships, to draw others into the worship of the God Almighty, the God of Abraham, the God of Christ, the God of this community of faith. And at each step, he builds an altar and worships the Lord. Ralph Jacobson of Working Preacher muses, it is not necessarily a great thing to be chosen. It is a pick up your cross, forsake what you know, and follow me kind of thing. Indeed, it is not easy to go boldly, faithfully, to be a part of God's work and mission, to seek to bring about something new and leave behind what we are used to and comfortable with, or perhaps even complacent in. Borrowing from Star Trek, which it is our overarching theme, I have a couple of more quotes this week. Captain Kirk, the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown, only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood. What we leave behind is not as important as how we lived. Now, I think that one's kind of interesting, and I had to think about that a little bit because hopefully what we leave behind is representative of how we lived. We'll have to think about that a bit longer. And then Kirk, in panic, freak-out mode. We got no ship, we got no crew. How are we going to get out of this one? And Spock, full of logic, we will find hope in the impossible. With the election of Abram and Sarai came a new relationship, a new ministry, a new way of God being in the world with us. They're not chosen for their own selves. They are chosen out of grace. The call binds God first to creation through Noah, then binds God to God's people. God promised with Abraham and the descendants to be in ongoing relationship. God is faithful to God's promises, always recreating, renewing, calling us, resurrecting us to new life and beyond. Let us be faithful. Let us go boldly, courageously into the worlds that we do not yet know, but are only hidden for the moment. Amen.